Welcome to the Vetiver Vibes podcast. We're your hosts, Nikki Frazier and Rachel Dean, certified clinical aromatherapists. We are excited to have you here on today's episode where you know that you'll get the best essential oil scoop.
This episode is brought to you by Essentria, a leading online school for aromatherapy. If you want to learn more about making organic skincare products, check out the courses at www.schoolofessentria.com. Welcome to this week's episode of Vetiver Vibes. Nikki Frazier here with Danae Robinett. Danae is a yoga teacher based in San Francisco Bay Area. She's been teaching for 19 years and a retreat leader for 12. A nurturer by nature, she's highly skilled at providing adaptations where all abilities are honored and challenged. And she's also her father's primary caregiver as he faces cancer for a third time. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I'm delighted to be here with you and also to hear my name pronounced in the French language.
Yeah,
What a
I know
delight.
we were just talking about that. I'm like, I don't know how to say it. It's just so natural for me to say it in French. So I'm happy I could say it in French for you.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about yoga and how we can incorporate aromatherapy into it, all of that jazz. But before we start with that, we always like to ask all of our guests, what is your favorite essential oil?
And I'm sure they all say that's hard.
They
But
do.
I'm gonna say it depends
Yes.
on the time of day, the season, how I'm feeling, what I want to amplify or take down a notch. But right now, in this exact moment, I am leaning in towards spearmint.
Oh,
And
nice.
yes, I consider it the softer sister to peppermint. Peppermint can be so invigorating and intense, but
Yes.
spearmint still has those same qualities and benefits, but on a much softer, gentler way. And so I'm choosing spearmint today.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, I always find peppermint's like, bam, in your face.
Yes.
And then spearmint is just kind of like, hey, I'm here lingering too, but I'm just not as like, bam, right there.
Totally. And I like to diffuse it with some citrus. So like spearmint and grapefruit first thing in the morning to get me going.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of, was it spearmint and I think it was sweet orange or no, lime. Lime. When I was studying, I used to do a lot of spearmint, lime, and rosemary. But I love the spearmint and lime combo. So yeah, that's awesome.
I'll have to try all three of those. Rosemary, I like also for mental
Yes,
clarity.
exactly. Yeah. So how did you get into yoga? I'd love to know about that.
Sure. So I can thank a coworker. At the time, I was working at Nordstrom, which is sort of a high-end, sort of fancy department store. And I was selling handbags with women who were like in their 40s and 50s. And I was in my 20s. And this coworker only knew that I had a background in dance and said, you should come along to this class. And I completely trusted her. I didn't even ask her what it was or how to prepare or any of that. It turned out it was Bikram. So Bikram just means someone's name, but the style of yoga is super hot and sweaty. They, turn up the heat to like 100 Fahrenheit and put in humidity. And the sequence in itself is rather simple, but with that added challenge of heat, it is challenging. And the class was okay for me. I modified something that I saw what they were offering, but I was like, ooh, I have an injury and I want to be mindful of that injury and not exactly do as they're saying, but still be respectful of the teacher, because that's how we are in dance. We're super respectful of the teacher. And that teacher, she scolded me. And
That's kind of really sad.
Right? When I think back to it. However, when I left the class, I felt so relaxed. And I was like, there's got to be more ways and styles to do this type of yoga thing. And from there, like that curiosity was ignited and I continued to explore it. And now as a teacher, I can thank both the coworker and this teacher who was more of like a drill sergeant, how I have become the complete opposite, right? I'm warm and welcoming and nurturing, and I want everyone to give it a go and a try, and meet people as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you said, you need to be able to make adaptations if needed. Not everyone has the
Yes.
same flexibility or the same health level either of, might have past injuries, might have current injuries, different things that you
Totally.
just can't do certain poses, can't do certain things, and that should be okay. So,
Yes.
a good lesson of maybe what not to do as well to keep with you.
Correct. And also, I like to use the word yet, right? Because not
Yeah.
yet, right?
Yes.
Maybe you are rehabilitating an injury or there is a health challenge, but it's temporary. You're going to get back to your baseline, or, in the cancer world, they like to say new normal, right?
Hmm.
Um, but still, adaptations are so important. In fact, every day you might feel different. You might have more
Yeah.
energy one day and tired the next. But the point is just to keep showing up on the mat and giving it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I know you use essential oils also. Can you share a little bit about how you got into essential oils?
Sure. So my first experience with essential oils, I recall, was maybe my first time having a massage. I think I was
Hmm.
about 19 or 20, and the room was just enveloped with the aroma of lavender. And truth be told, I didn't like it. Um, and then push forward, I started teaching yoga in 2005, and I thought, oh, that lavender, it's supposed to be relaxing. So I started using lavender as I was teaching a type of yoga called restorative yoga. And
Hmm.
most students were open to it. I'd have it in the palm of my hands and I'd come over, of course, ask, would you like
Hmm.
me to sort of place my hands over your nose briefly for you to take in a few breaths? Most loved it,
Hmm.
even though I didn't really like it, right? And one student in particular said, "Oh, I don't want that." I was so adamant, and I was a green teacher at the time, so I was like, "Okay, I'm not going to use it." Um, and then I kind of took a break from the oils. I kind of reached for citronella to kind of be my bug repellent, but I kind of took a break.
Hmm.
And then maybe in 2011, 12, 13, I was teaching at a yoga studio and I was visiting one of the teachers in her home. And I said, "Oh my gosh, Penny, I have such a headache." And she's like, "I know what to do. You need lavender." Right. And she proceeded to douse my crown with lavender. Now, as we know, essential oil lovers and aromatherapy experts, a little bit goes a long way, right? You don't douse anybody with a ton of essential oil.
Especially not pure. You always need to dilute them.
Yes,
Oh.
yes. And I'm so happy you said the pure word, because in no less than 30 minutes, I was in her bathroom puking. I
Oh
was
no.
having a
Yeah.
reaction. That was so um, unmistakable that that was not a pure product. That was
Yeah.
not, that was something from the drugstore. And bless her heart, she had all those sweet intentions, but whew, wow.
Yeah, no, I mean, putting any oils on meat like that is not
It's
going to be good.
it's a no-go.
Yeah, especially by the sounds of it, quite a large quantity. So yeah, I mean, that would put anyone's nervous system into a frenzy, body into a frenzy, and kind of rebel at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But thankfully, someone in my circle, in my community, was consistently sort of nudging me along. I kept seeing these bottles in yoga studios, and they were just on the fringes, and I was curious. And I finally did have a conversation with someone, and they were like, "You know what? The purity matters." And
Mhm.
I know you had this experience, because of course I share them
Yeah.
the experience I just shared with the audience. And they said, "We want you to try this." And I shoved it back at them and said, "That's no way that's lavender. That is nothing I have ever smelled before. I am
Yeah.
kind of, what? Like, okay." My whole world was, my eyes were open. Like my world just changed. And then I realized how important the quality matters and decided, okay, I'm going to give it a go. I didn't have any negative effects. And ever since then, I use the oils in my household, for cleaning, for just smelling good, diffusing, and also within yoga now, but only with
Awesome.
private clients, because I decided from that student a long time ago, they probably have a point, in a
Mhm.
group setting. It's kind of hard to make sure that's a yes for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many great things have come into my mind with that of we had so many times products that we get over the counter, and I in my head, my little ones are not quite so little anymore, but it hasn't been that long since they were little, and so many baby products and kids products or
Mm,
different products. It's all like lavender, lavender, lavender to help with sleep because
hmm.
they know it's an easy target to parents who are sleep deprived of anything that can help get their child to sleep. Let's slather on these labels. And it's always infused with lavender or contains lavender or whatever.
Hmm.
And you just smell it and I'm like, you can just smell the chemical
Mm.
toxicity, plastic, fake lavender type aroma to it. And I think it's just because I'm not a huge fan of lavender. Even of like the actual essential oil, like I'll use it, I don't mind it. But when I'm looking for oils to help with, and I because it's such a big one for relaxation,
Hmm.
calming, sleep, I'm like that's the almost the last oil I actually go for myself. For
Same.
clients, so many of them love lavender, so I will always grab lavender. I will always have it as an option presented to clients. But it is honestly the last one that I typically reach for myself. I love my woodsy, my grounding, all
Mm.
of those types of oils for relaxation and calming instead. So yeah, it's so many people just have that when you have that fake scent in your
Mhm.
olfactory, like that's what your olfactory knows and associates when you hear a word,
Mm.
then you don't necessarily realize like, oh no, when you have a real essential oil, it can actually smell like the actual plant, or it can actually
Yes.
smell really, really nice versus that fake,
Synthetic.
aroma.
Yes.
Yeah, aroma of it. And you also had a really great point of, diffusing in large spaces. And it is something that we talk a lot about in with our students and and in podcasts before of, having that informed consent from everyone is
Hmm.
important. There's a lot of different, I find, especially health stores that I'll go into. There's a couple in my town in particular that I walk into, and they always have the diffuser going all the time.
Oh,
I've never walked in without the diffuser going off. And in my head, I'm going, well, one, do you have the consent of everyone in here because they are powerful? And two, the workers who are then inhaling this
hmm.
for 4 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, like that's not necessarily great for them either,
Hmm.
to inhaling it that long. But sometimes putting it over the hand and offering it individually isn't like that's a great
Mm.
way of doing it still though, because then it's not necessarily everybody,
Sure.
um, but that individual person. It's not quite as strong that aspect, versus diffusing an entire room. So
Unless you're teaching a workshop that's called Restorative Yoga and Essential Oils. And yet I
yes.
did have one come along where it was completely in the program notes. This is what we're doing, how we're doing it, and I'd share 6 oils in a 2-hour experience. And people
Yeah.
could opt, passing the bottle around, they could smell or not smell. And one woman said, I can't, I'm having a reaction. I said, with such grace and compassion, what reaction are you having?
Yeah.
Right? Can you tap into that? Because she was just so concerned. And I
Yeah.
still to this date, I'm not clear about her concern because she did not claim for having a headache. Her breathing was normal and regulated. She just had this fear almost. And it felt
Mm.
so sad, right? Because it's called what it's called, and we're being very clear and upfront, and you signed up and also paid for this experience. When I met her halfway, I opened the door.
Yeah.
I invited her to go out into the front area, and still she could hear the content being shared,
Yeah.
although she wasn't able to do the poses. Yeah, it's weird how
Some people might not read the small print
sure.
but yes, if you are teaching an actual, and it says, that is a very different situation versus, every yoga class or every store, every wherever situation is constantly diffusing, diffusing, diffusing. Very different situation. Thank you for
Yes,
pointing that out.
happy to do so. Consent's
Yeah.
very important on all fronts.
Yeah, it is. And just having that information but so speaking of, that restorative yoga using the essential oils with yoga,
Mhm.
can you share a little bit about that? So how do you use the essential oils with your yoga practice?
So again, I love the phrase, it depends. I learned it from one of my yoga teachers, but truly and sincerely, it does depend, right? So if the practice is happening in the morning, maybe I want something a little more invigorating or energizing. So I would lean towards the mints, right? We mentioned peppermint and spearmint before. The citrus tend to be also uplifting. So they're nice to use in the morning. And then I think you also mentioned the point about relaxation and sleep. So if the practice was happening in the evening, right? Because I do meet with clients after they're done with work for the day. So then we meet in the home, maybe even post dinner, and have more of a gentler practice. Then it's definitely the trees, as you said, the woodsy oils, right? And it's so cool when we think about what the plant parts are, right? And the name of this podcast is Vetiver. I've heard it both ways, vibes, right?
Yeah.
And that is an oil I lean into a lot. The first time I smelled it, I said, "Oh, it smells like dirt and earth." And then I actually used it and realized how it just brings you down to, if your feet are in the air, if you're like floating in the clouds, you are back to earth. Yes.
Yeah, that's why I love it so much. And I know I'm the very much the minority when it comes to vetiver, but as soon as I smelled vetiver, it smelled like joy and happiness and childhood and everything amazing, because to me it's just mulch. And I grew up on it's a big enough property, but we hauled a lot of mulch growing up, and I did not like it at the time, I will be honest. We moved a lot of rocks, we hauled a lot of mulch, we did a lot of gardening, different things like that, and it just, because it's such that earth aroma, it just brought me back to that. And it still does to this day when I use it, which is why I love it so much. But if you're not someone who likes the smell of dirt, then yeah, most people do kind of cringe at it. And they're like, oh, that's again, one of those in your face, a little stronger than what people are expecting when they smell it.
True. How great though. I want to just go back to that point you made about this memory, right? The aroma of something transported you back to childhood. And I think that's one of the most significant, special gifts of the oils, is that, yes, you can smell something so pure and clean and then have a memory just come to your mind. Like, our sense of smell is so powerful. Wow, that's so great. That, I think that happened when I shared the lime oil with my dad. Growing up, I wore fragrance in high school. I thought that was the cool thing to do until I got wiser and smarter. And he'd always refer to it as smelly stuff, right? And he was right. And as I started to get more curious about the oils, I wanted to involve him too with it. And he'd always say, "Oh, smelly stuff," until I shared the lime, and he closed his eyes, and it was as if he was transported somewhere in a memory. He didn't share, but his face just became childlike almost. It was such a beautiful thing to witness, that simply smelling something that's good can have that effect.
Absolutely. And that's one of the many reasons why I love working with aromatherapy, because it does have that power. Our olfactory system is very powerful. And it can bring us to happy memories, and it can also bring us to, challenging memories. So that's where it's important that every person has their own unique views on certain aromas, and what may work for one person might not work for someone else. Partially for that reason too, right? If someone has a negative association with an aroma, we don't want to pick that aroma for them to use. And so
I agree. And yet, because with yoga, sometimes people may have a concern about a particular pose, maybe like inversions. There could be a level of fear around inverting, right? We don't walk around on our hands, for instance. And so you definitely temper that with compassion and understanding and space, but yet you also don't totally discard it, because there is value in a headstand. There is value in inversions of a different type, right? It doesn't have to be headstand or handstand. There are other ways to invert. So I wouldn't write it off completely. And same with the oils. If someone does have that negative reaction, I mean, my own self, I can say, I was anti-lavender for the longest time. And thankfully someone was just super consistent and didn't give up. that I decided, okay, let me try one more time, but I know it's going to be like this. And then boom, eyes were wide open.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, depending on, where that memory takes you, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Yes, of
Sometimes,
course.
yeah, it's just like, okay, I have that with patchouli. I'm still working on it.
Aha.
It's an aroma I'm working on. I'm very vocal about that of I'll try it every now and then. And I'm like, yeah, nope, still smells like mothballs. I'll pass.
And then you can use it maybe for that purpose, right? In the
Yeah,
closet, to
it's
keep everything free of
right.
the pests.
Right. It does. It just, I don't know. It reminds me of mothballs. And I'm like, yeah, maybe in time, because I was like that with geranium.
Oh.
I despised geranium until my last pregnancy, where it was the oil that I needed, I craved, and it went
Mm.
from my second least favorite, patchouli being my least favorite, and then geranium, to now being my second favorite, right after vetiver. So it's interesting how the body, as we age, as we go through different shifts. For me, it was that hormonal shift that I just
Yeah.
started to crave geranium, and now
Mhm.
it's one that I reach for constantly. Um, so yeah, I know we kind of went off on that little tangent there, but so bringing it back to yoga.
Of course.
But I think that is important to take into the conversation of when you are doing yoga, you want those aromas that are
Mm.
bringing happy memories or calming
Yes.
emotions.
Yes.
Like you said, depending on time of day, maybe what your goal is for
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
bringing in that aspect is going to be very key for in that
Definitely.
moment.
Definitely. And, in private practice, maybe I work with one or just two oils in a 1 hour session, something in the very beginning to kick us off. And then more of a relaxing aroma to help them unwind. The
Mhm.
pose is called Shavasana. So we lay down and take a rest, basically.
I love Shavasana. And that
Oh,
was one
good.
of when because I've never really used essential oils in yoga practice. And typically, my biggest yoga times were always through pregnancy.
Mm.
I always gravitated during pregnancy the most. And looking back, I'm like, oh, if someone were to just have like a nice cedar wood or Roman
Hmm.
chamomile or a
Yes.
vetiver
Yes.
or even a sweet orange or even rosemary basil, I'm like, and just waft that over me during Shavasana, I think
Hmm.
that would just make it like that 11 out of 10 for me.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I want to say how outrageously amazing that you stepped into yoga as a pregnant goddess, as I like to call them,
Mhm.
PGers for short, um, because it's so beneficial to everyone, but especially for women, to build the upper body strength, to hold that babe in arms, to help with the hips. And I've always found when pregnant women join class, they are stronger than anybody in the class, and they are willing and open and curious to try anything. And it's so great to have them in the regular class, but to have the actual prenatal class where you're building community
Yeah.
with other women and maybe forming friendships that last beyond the time of the class. And maybe when babes are born, you can have the play dates already on the
Yeah.
schedule. It's great.
Yeah, that's actually how I was introduced to yoga. Was I was just looking for something to do while pregnant, to help stretch out some of those muscles and
Cool.
to connect with baby. And yeah, there was a local prenatal course for yoga that was being offered, and yeah, I did it throughout. I just kept going, week after week throughout my entire pregnancy, and I've done it for all four of my pregnancy. I had the most
Amazing.
amazing teacher for my first two pregnancies, and then she left. And I was so distraught for my third pregnancy. And I'm like, no, but you're my prenatal yoga teacher. Like I feel like
Mm.
I'm cheating on her to go to someone else. It was so funny. And I even tried to like convince her to come back, and she's like, no, sorry. She was focusing on other things. And I'm like, all right. But it's you make that connection with your yoga teacher also when you
Yes.
see them, every week, every 2 weeks
Hmm.
for a certain amount of time, you start to get to know the teacher starts to
Yes.
get to know their class, especially those repeat people.
Yes.
So it's really nice to have those connections.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of the public class. When people do become returners and they come again and again, you can really start to grow their practice and the friendships that form in and out of class. It's a side benefit. It's so lovely to witness that.
It is. Yeah.
Mhm.
So do you typically, because I know, like you said, you use essential oils more so in your private practice. So do you typically just have one that you use throughout the entire practice, or do you kind of have different ones for different periods of the practice?
Mm. Again, it depends because
Mhm.
also different clients, right? Because
Yeah.
I may already be hip to their interests, their likes or dislikes, right? They're all about the flowers, or
Yeah.
actually, no, they're not, you know. um, so thinking about the plant parts, like what are they all about? Like going back to the trees, right? If we think about the tree and the roots, that hardy material, if the goal is to get the student to feel more grounded and steady and stable, then I would lean towards oils that are in the tree family, if you will. So, as you said, cedarwood is a great choice for that. And if I know the student is a little bit more anxious, or in the sister science to yoga is Ayurveda, and it's this very brilliant, complex way of thinking about health. But if they are more of a Vata type, a dosha, Vata dosha, where more governed by air and ether, and they're kind of like head in the clouds feel, then, again, another tree oil, although vetiver is a root. So I would choose vetiver for that type of student, to put it maybe on the crown even, and then if a student is got so much energy, right? They just kind of need to kind of bring it all in. I'd actually choose bergamot or bergamot. I don't know how you say it.
I say bergamot, but I know a lot of
Okay.
people who say bergamot.
Okay.
It's one of those flip a coin, however you say it.
Right, which is actually a citrus.
Mhm.
And yet, when I think about all the other citruses like grapefruit or sweet orange, as you said, tangerine, those are more like sweet and kind of uplifting, energizing. But bergamot is incredibly calming, I find, and also my students find. So I like to use that one.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's awesome. Yeah, and so many different benefits for each one, like you said. And depending on even just that day, that moment,
Mhm.
what worked for a client last week, like let's say you see them weekly, what worked
Mhm.
for the client last week during a yoga session might be different next
So
week
true.
type thing,
So true.
right? So for let's say someone at home who's doing yoga,
Mhm.
if they want to, pick some of their own favorite oils to use during their practice, that's always something I always like to keep in mind for anything. But
Mhm.
come at it with new eyes each
Yes.
practice as to what you
Yes.
would pick.
Yes, I often use the framework when I am taking my own practice, right? My own sadhana, like how do I want to feel
Hmm.
and what needs to move? But if we
Hmm.
put the oils on that, so how do I want to feel still counts. And what do I want to, exaggerate or amplify?
Hmm.
What needs to like come down a notch or decrease? Like, what am I increasing? What am I decreasing? And then you can use that framework and make some choices about the oils too. And again, if you're taking practice at home, 1 to 2, 3 max, if you're practicing for an hour. Otherwise, it's a little bit overwhelming and
Hmm.
you're not giving the time for the oil to do its work, right?
Yeah, no, that I agree, and that's a really great point.
Yeah.
If you start using 10 different oils during
Oh,
a one
yes.
hour practice, that's not your body and your mind and body don't have the time to
The
fully
process.
appreciate or process
Yes.
the first one before you move on to the second one.
Right.
And then we're just inundating, and instead of calming our autonomic nervous system, we're probably more actually, dysregulating it and doing the opposite of what we want to do.
Right. Right. Less is more. Less is
Yes.
more. Less is more.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you usually use the essential oils in the practice? Do you usually just palm them over, or are you diffusing? How do you typically recommend people to use essential oils when they're doing yoga?
So I like to use it in the palm of my hand. Depending on what oil it is, you might need a little carrier oil,
Mhm.
right? If you just want to take a quick sniff from the bottle, you can. However, if it's a good sized bottle, that's a lot of drops and a lot of inhalation that you're getting.
Mhm.
Um,
And it'll start to oxidize it if you do it too often also,
Good
right?
point. It'll
So
degrade it. Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. That's a very important point. Yes.
Hmm.
So if you're choosing just the one oil, why not diffuse it? Keep it
Hmm.
simple. I like to put the oils in different places. So, we lift our arms a lot in yoga.
Hmm.
So maybe a little carrier oil in the forearm and then the oil that I'm going to use in the forearm so I can keep smelling it as
Right.
I'm lifting and lowering my
Hmm.
arms. I know a little bit about reflexology points, and the big toe is considered connected to the brain. For me, we stand on our feet in yoga, so it doesn't serve me to put it on my soles of my feet. I actually put, again, a little carrier oil on the top of my foot, so like
Hmm.
directly below the toes, but on the top of the foot. So as I'm folding over,
Hmm.
I can also get some aroma that way too.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm a registered reflexologist, and when I hear or read people saying like, put it on the bottom of your feet, and it's not in association with reflexology because I
Oh.
do agree, when you're working with essential oils during reflexology, that's a different thing.
Mm.
But when it's just like, yes, I have a headache, put the oils on the bottom of your feet. No, that's not going to help your headache. Not
Right.
in the
Yeah.
same capacity. So yes,
Yeah.
but that's a great, I never thought of just, the top of your feet for when you do bend over this way, you've
Mhm.
got that scent there and, the arm, because there's a lot of, I'm just thinking of
Yes,
like the warrior poses of the sun salutation, different things like that. I'm
totally.
like, that's so awesome. Because to me in my head, I often in all kinds of different other practices that I do, when I want to use a few different oils during something, I have a lot of just almost like little almost like baby jars, but they're not baby
Uh-huh.
jar, but that size of baby jars.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have a cotton pad in there, and then I just have
Ooh,
an oil on that, and then I label it of like, okay, this will be my rosemary, this is my lavender, this is my bergamot, whatever it oils that I have, and then this way, just before that section, I uncap. I take 3 deep breaths, I recap, and then when I want another
right.
aroma, I then reach for that bottle. But I mean, during
Ooh,
yoga,
that's smart.
it might take you almost out of
Hmm.
the mind frame, but between poses, if you wanted to shift from like at the beginning, kind of like an uplifting aroma to get you that motivation to go,
Yes,
and then right
yes.
before Shavasana, that calming, grounding oils, taking those 3 deep breaths right before you settle into Shavasana, ways of doing it that way too.
I like the jars, that idea. I think that's smart because then you can also keep it closed and, you took the couple of breaths and now it's closed. So it's not
Yeah.
always happening. And
Yeah.
yes, please take deep breaths.
Yes.
Really savor the aroma, the
Yeah.
plant parts that you're inhaling.
Yeah.
So
And the
important.
nice thing with the jars is that I can then reuse them for different things,
Sure.
a
Sure.
different session later on, different situation later on. I did that a lot with pregnancy. I mentioned that a lot with pregnancy with when it comes to birthing, because what you
Mm,
love during pregnancy is not, or even when you're not pregnant, is not typically what you like in labor, which is always interesting.
I've heard. And that's
Yeah.
such a good
So,
point. Labor, or if you are going to be in a hospital setting, if you're going to have a private room, bring your tools with you.
yeah.
I had a private client who, at the beginning of the year, had a spine surgery and was going to, have the surgery and then have recovery time in the hospital. And I
Mhm.
said to her, make some choices. Grab the diffuser if you want. I double dog dare you to diffuse in your private room. That will ensure the nurses come through and check on you. When my father was in a skilled nursing facility, I didn't ask. I had the belief that I will just beg for forgiveness if it becomes a concern or an issue. And I chose to diffuse a couple of things together to just kind of keep the ookie dookie, the
Yeah.
nastiness of the setting itself at bay.
Yeah.
And man, all the nurses, they were curious. They wanted to come in, and I wanted all eyes plus more eyes on my dad. So it worked
Yeah.
for me. Yes, use your tools, not just at home, but if you are going to be, giving birth or having a surgery, bring them along. If they
Yeah,
tell you no,
absolutely.
then that's fine. But if you have them, they can support you.
Yeah. And just to get back to the breath, like you said,
Mm,
so important during yoga to focus in on that breath and take the moment to enjoy it. People don't take enough
mm,
time to enjoy, it's kind of might sound weird of, enjoy breathing, but we do need to do it every day. But it's a time to check in and really see how you are.
yes.
And do you often recommend like different types of breathing when you're working with essential oils, or is it just kind of like different types of breathing because it's going with the yoga?
Oh, such a great question. So it depends. I know it sounds crazy because I say
Yeah,
that so much, but I'm going to give the
but it's
reason.
true.
So, yes, it is true. If you are in more of the flow type experience, right, where you're moving from pose to pose, but not like rapid, where you're kind of
Hmm.
none of that, right? Um, Definitely as you're breathing in and out, we call it ujjayi, inhale through the nose, exhale through the nose, but create a little vibration, a little sound at the base of the throat.
Hmm.
It could be sounds like a whisper for some, Darth Vader for others.
Yeah, I've often heard of the Darth Vader breath. That's what when I was first introduced to it, that's what it was. It was the Darth Vader breath.
Yes. So then maybe not so many oils with that, right?
Mhm.
But if you are doing a pranayama practice where you're actually doing a couple of different techniques, maybe, and you want to help create a little more capacity for your breathing, maybe you lean towards peppermint, we mentioned is so invigorating, or even eucalyptus. I really like
Mm.
eucalyptus a lot. Um, and I would, again, carrier oil and massage some into the lungs. And you could just, I don't know, take your shirt and take your
Mhm.
nose into your shirt and take a couple breaths and then begin the pranayama practice.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I just never thought of having them on different areas and as you lean in. So I really, really enjoy
Oh,
that
so
idea
good.
of it. Yeah. Awesome. But is there anything else that you think would be beneficial for our listeners to learn or know when it comes to yoga and aromatherapy with yoga?
Be curious and lean into your gut, your instincts, right? Because it's so individual, right? The way
Mhm.
you come into a pose, yes, for let's say a balance pose, they're standing on one leg, for instance. That's the goal, to stand on one leg, but it might look different from you to me to anybody else, right? You can start small, and you can make a
Mhm.
big shape, you can make a small shape, but you're still standing on one leg, so it counts for
Yeah.
yoga. Be curious.
Mm.
And same with the oils, trust your gut, right? If you're really feeling this pull towards one aroma, keep working with it. Why not? If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yes.
Concept.
Yes.
But still be curious to, if you only have the one favorite, there's so many plants, right? So many flowers, so many trees, so many herbs, right? So many
Mhm.
citrus. Be curious, I think, would be the takeaway that I'd want people to have about yoga and also about the oils.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. And it is so true. Usually we only start getting into things when that need arises. For me, it
Oh,
was the
sure.
pregnancy that it was the pregnancy that was my need of relaxation and stretching of those muscles. And I wish I would have, you know, discovered it beforehand.
Mm.
But it's typically when we have that need that we find something.
Mm.
So yeah, I love that aspect of be curious. And just try the different poses. I
Yes.
like be curious with keep that open with the different poses because it when you said be curious, it made me think of pigeon pose,
Mm.
which the first time I did it, I hated it and I quickly developed a love-hate relationship with pigeon pose
Sure.
because it was uncomfortable, but oh, did it feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
it felt so good. Even I remember 9 months pregnant and just
Yeah.
being in that pigeon pose and just stretching and belly in the way and everything. But I was like, oh, it just felt so, so good.
Yay. Oh,
And I
that's so
remember seeing
sweet.
it being when she was demonstrating it, I was like, not a chance. Mm-mm, not a chance am I doing that. And when I did it, It was the most amazing thing ever. So absolutely, your be curious is so important. I love that.
Oh, wonderful. And may I add one more thing? It only works if you work it, right?
Yes.
So the oils only work if you actually uncap the bottles and put them to work, right? In the diffuser, in the palm of your hand, however you're going to use them, maybe in an Epsom salt bath. And same with the yoga. It only works when you actually step onto the mat. 90% of yoga is walking into the room, right? Getting onto the studio or clicking onto the YouTube video or however you're doing it.
Yeah.
And then it takes that courage to choose it is what I mean. So yeah, it only works if you work it.
Awesome. I love that. I so love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on this week's episode. I'm Nikki here with Danae, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for spending your time with us here at Vetiver Vibes. This episode was brought to you by Essentria, a leading online aromatherapy school. Don't forget to check out some of our free resources at www.schoolofessentria.com.
If you love this episode or you got a lot of value out of it, please make sure you share it with someone in your community who you think would enjoy it too. If you haven't already subscribed or reviewed the show yet, you can go on over to your preferred streaming platform and hit subscribe, then leave a review. This is the best way to help support us, and we appreciate it. Email us with a screenshot of your review, and we will send you a free guided meditation as our way to say thank you.
This podcast is for information purposes only. We are certified clinical aromatherapists and holistic health professionals. If you have a medication concern, please refer to your health team. Everyone's health is unique to themselves, so the topics and suggestions stated may or may not apply directly to you.